Welcome to Real Talk, History as a Weapon for Black Liberation. Today's guest is the esteemed Dr. Maulana Karenga. Dr. Karenga is a professor and chair of the Department of Africana Studies at California Long Beach University, an activist scholar of national and international renown for the last 50 years. Dr. Karenga has played a major role in Black intellectual and political culture since the 60s, especially in Black studies and in the social movements that include Black Power, Black Arts Movement, Reparations, and the Million Man March, for which he wrote the mission statement. Also, he is chair of the National Association of Kawaida Organizations, executive director of the African American Cultural Center, US, and a board member of NCBS. An ethical philosopher, Dr. Karenga has developed over the years a creative and scholarly Kawaida interpretation of ancient Egyptian ethical thought as a living tradition and a useful philosophical option for critical reflection on the urgent issues of our time. He is also the author of numerous scholarly articles and books, including essays on struggle, Kawaida and questions of life and struggle, Mott, the moral ideal in ancient Egypt, a study of classical African ethics, and of course, one of the best-selling texts in the field of Africana Black Studies, and then the introduction to Black Studies. He is currently writing a book on the social ethical philosophy of Malcolm X, which he has titled The Liberation Ethics of Malcolm X. Moreover, he is the creator of the Pan-African cultural holiday Kwanzaa and the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles which make up the spine of the Kawaida. And he is the author of the authoritative text on Kwanzaa entitled Kwanzaa, a celebration of family, community, and culture. Maulana,
yes,
it is a pleasure to have you with me today. So I want to welcome you. And I want to say, before we get started, I think I've known you now for about 20 years. We served on a National Council for Black Studies for way more than a decade together.
that's right.
And I want to say that I have deep and profound respect for you and for your intellectual contributions to the field, to the transdiscipline of Black Africana studies, as well as to the overall movement for liberation by African descendant people, particularly the nation within a nation in the US. And so I want to start with that. And now I want to move to what I traditionally do with my guests. I want to know who's on my program. You know what I mean? Who I
Yeah.
got here with me.
Mhm.
So I try and get into some biographical questions that get me to how you became who you are. So here's the question for you. I want to understand how you remade yourself into Dr. Maulana Karenga. You didn't start at
Mhm.
this philosophical, political praxis. So
Mhm.
how did you become Dr. Maulana Karenga? And I want you to discuss your formative years. And I want you to talk about your perception of how your class, the place where you were raised, because I think place is very important, and the time period, social context in which you came of age, how did that impact the development of your social political consciousness? And here I'm specifically concerned with how you became Black. And I mean the context in which my dear brother, Bill Cross, talks about negrescence or the process of Negro to Black conversion, right? And so I want to know how that happened. And because you are also a radical, you're a socialist.
Mhm.
So I want to talk about how you became radicalized. So tell me how you became who you are in terms of your Blackness and your radicalization.
The question. I'm glad I returned. We enjoy working with you in NCS. I enjoy that. So this is a good one. So I was born in Maryland on the Eastern Shore. And my teachers and my family stress the historical significance. I'm from a segregated period, a period of segregation. And we have all black schools. And so we teach black history. It's a lived experience and it's a learned experience, right? So they're teaching us. And, you know, people like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, are deep in our conversation all the time, but also Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, Paul Laurence Dunbar, just people who've made the Harlem Renaissance, all this. So I'm getting a thorough grounding in blackness right there. So, but another way I get it is not only my education, but first in my home. I'm born on a farm. People say chicken farm, but that's not right. I don't know who started that. But the reality is, this was part of people's character assassination, trying to fit me in the formula, putting down my foot to fit their shoes, that kind of thing. But the reality is that I came from a family that was race conscious. You used to have what we call race people, and my father especially was very much so. He used to tell me, the struggles of black people, and my mother used to warn me against, what they called the rebbies, it was rabbit rebbies, right? And that what we have to do is walk through the world. And my father and mother used to use this from the biblical. They were very Christian. My father's a Christian minister, Baptist minister, right? And so quoting the Bible is like everyday conversation, but there's a theology in this. There's an ethics in this. And later on, I would draw on these ethics and then see that they are not simply Christian, but go back even further to ancient Africa and certainly ancient Egypt. So one of the things they used to say, when you walk in the world, you have to be wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove, because you're in a situation where people want to kill you. And one of the things we never get used to as black people is people hating us, right? We have never done anything to them, but we need to, in fact, be conscious of them and defend ourselves. And one of the ways to defend ourselves was to be wise as serpents, right? To strategize and then be gentle as dove. But if you had to, and my father argued this, my mother, she always, was very afraid for us all the time. I mean, it's not just now after Trayvon Martin, but since our history, our mothers have been afraid for us. Our women in the community have been afraid for us, our fathers, etc. So
Very much so.
I grew up in a context where I'm the 14th child. I'm the seventh son and the 14th child, right? Born in the seventh month on the 14th day. So people thought that had some significance. So they gave me a lot of support. So I never talked mainly to my peers. I always talked to older people, right? And they reinforced me. Even when I came out here, and these people didn't know me, I tended to talk just to older people. I never played sports. I never liked sports. I would always read, right? And so my mother would bring me books to read. My father would read with me and talk to me. And so I'm developing a life of the mind right there at my house, but also
now, any of these books, Maulana, are any of these books in the tradition of the Black intellectual tradition? Are these works in Black history? Is this Carter Woodson? What are you reading?
Black history, especially. I was just giving to get to my professor, Professor Walden. He taught us Black history and world history. It's the first time I knew that the Muslims had defeated the Christians, right? I mean, so
now this is high school, right?
The Christian was defeating white people, right? So that was something, right? And he was talking about how we have to see ourselves in world terms, right? And so when we read Carter G. Woodson talked about us as a world people. We read also Du Bois, right? Now, one of the things that Du Bois said about double consciousness, I was more favorable to that than I am now, of course, because I don't think I have a double consciousness. But I think many Black people did have and do have that consciousness, and they can't resolve.
Well, the petty bourgeoisie had it. Bourgeoisie had it.
I'm sorry. The masses don't have it. They know who they are, right? And so that's why with our brother, fellow scholar, Dr. Cross, when he talks about the pre-encounter, when we don't have a consciousness of Black, I can't imagine.
No. That's not what he's saying, Maulana.
Oh,
He's
tell
saying
me
that
what you think he's saying.
he's saying that it
And remember, this
hasn't
is your
become
opinion, just like mine.
it hasn't
Go.
become salient, right?
Yeah.
My interpretation,
There you go.
and I spend a lot of time with Bill,
Yeah.
um,
Good.
is that, in fact, I had Bill on the show, he's one of my first guests,
Good.
is that he's talking about when it becomes salient in a social sense that you understand that you can be killed because you're Black, you're going to be held back because you're Black. So he's not just talking about understanding us in terms of being a cultural being, African-American culture. He's talking about understanding where it places you in society.
And I'm saying that I disagree with that because I believe that the lived experience of Black people already teach them. That's why the young woman that's never been to school or just been to first grade, they choose the white doll. And that's why people are afraid of white people when they grow up in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, all those
That's the
places where there's
pre-encounter that
terrorism
he's
every
talking
day.
about.
Would you say?
That's the pre-encounter he's talking about is saying that you begin being overdetermined by the images that you pick up in terms of whiteness, and therefore you come to that's where you lean, and you like I've read so many papers where people think they don't know that they're Black and what Black means until they encounter white folks. But look, I don't want to spend our time on this debate.
Right.
I want you to tell me
They
how
know that
you
Black
get to
is a
be
position
who
of
you are.
disadvantage
Yeah.
and oppression.
But they
They
come
know
to
that.
understand that. They don't know that coming out the womb. It's a learned experience, as you just said. You got
At
to
an
learn
early
it.
age.
Yeah. Yes, it's at an
So when
early
he talks
age.
about
It's at an
pre-encounter,
early age.
okay, I'm gonna do what you asked me to. Let's
Thank you.
stop on that and just say we got different approaches.
Okay, Baba.
Thank you
We
so
got a
much.
different interpretation.
Different interpretation.
All
Okay.
right.
So what was the next point?
So the question
Mhm.
to a nationalist leader,
Okay.
I want to know what are the kind of critical incidents that spurred your thought?
Mhm.
What are the things that you were involved in that
Mhm.
made you think more critically?
Mhm.
In other
Right.
words, people need to know, these young
Yeah,
people
but
need to know that it's a developmental process that they too
Mhm.
can go through and will
It
go
is.
through.
We have to. So let me just finish with my family in my town. I'm in a small town, and so there's a stress on moral ground and speaking truth, doing justice, loving each other, etc. Second, there's a racial consciousness that makes you feel an obligation to strive for excellence for your family and for your people. Do good for the race, they told me all the time, every time. Make sure you don't embarrass the race, right? Always understand you have to be twice as good as white people to advance, right? These are things that all the Black people just about knew, right? That we should be self-defensive all the time, on the defense, right? Because we never know when they're coming. And that's why I said about that analogy, that biblical analogy about the wise as serpents and gentle as dove. Don't provoke it, but if it comes to you, you have to defend yourself. Togetherness.
So now, is this a
I
big
like
community? I mean, how many people are we talking about, Maulana? Are
And
there like 20,000 Black folk, 10,000,
no,
50,000 Black
this is a
folk?
little small
How small?
community.
Okay, how
Yeah,
small is it? And
yeah,
what's the
it's
size of the Black
hundreds.
community
That's
there?
all, hundreds,
Hundreds. Okay,
maybe
okay.
maybe two or three churches. That's all, two or
Okay.
three churches. And so,
Just
and
a
like that,
village.
can I? What you gonna say?
Go.
And so at these churches, my father and mother are Baptist, but a lot of times the Baptist church was further away. So I went to a holiness church. I like how they
Oh.
dance and everything. But mom and
Okay,
pop wanted us to go to a church. They just wanted us to go to a church, right? And to be grounded in this theology, in this ethic. And then of course the togetherness, you always help each other. And we loving your neighbor. That principle is real with them. And they taught relationality, how we are who we are in relationship. Also, the value and usefulness of education. This is something they can never take away from you, they used to say. Love learning, they said.
Yeah.
Don't
My
just go
parents
to
used to say
school,
that.
love to learn and use it to serve our people and to honor our people. It's back later on in college. I mean, and when I leave UCLA to join the movement, I'm thinking of Mary McLeod Bethune, who said knowledge is the prime need of the hour, but people want to know what you're going to do with your knowledge. And she said it's up to us to discover the dawn and then share it with the masses of our people and our youth who need it most.
Okay, let me slow you down. you know I had nothing but respect for you, but you're giving me your philosophy. I want to know how you developed your philosophy. I want to know the process.
That's how I did it with the things I've just
Okay,
told you.
so you
I'm
told me
building
that
on what my mother and father told you.
you're getting trained from your mother and father, but at some point
I
you're
got
not
what?
in. At some point you leave this small protective Black community. I mean,
Yeah.
this is what you're telling me
Yeah.
sounds much like the African village, right? And it's what you get in small towns. Everybody
Okay.
know
So
everybody,
I'm
good
gonna leave the
values.
town in a minute.
How do you get from there?
But I got to let you know. See, I got to talk about my family because that's it. So I
Okay,
got two
okay.
brothers that leave the village and go. One of them goes to college and goes to John Hopkins, goes to Howard, teaches at Shaw. And so that's an intellectual. I have great admiration for him. He gave me a lot of grounding on things, concepts, excellent, always challenging me, uh, compelling me to justify my argument. Because as I'm moving into Black consciousness and in nationalist consciousness, he's different because he's basically integrationist, not integration in a servile way. Because he's very. Sometimes people would think him arrogant, right? Because he's so intelligent and
He
deep.
wants to make America treat us right and
Yeah,
give us
that's what he
what
wants
he
to do,
believes to
right?
do. Yeah,
And,
I know those. Yeah, there's a lot of us like that.
Like King
Yeah,
said, we can't legislate your love, but we can put legislation where you don't kill me. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So that's
yeah.
basically what they were talking about. So
Where I
anyhow,
get the
I
job I
leave. So
deserve.
then I had a second brother, Mac, who was a merchant marine, and he traveled around the world. And he gave me a world consciousness, right? And so I go with him. First, I go to York, Pennsylvania, and finish my high school. I go school early because we're a farming community. People can't just wait till they're 6 to go to school. So I went to school just when I just got 5 and went in. And so I was always ahead. And so I go to York, I finish school, and then I come out here. But I had come out here in California doing my junior high too, because he had brought me out. He said, "You need to get out of this country. You need to be in an urban area." And so he would talk to me about world things, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then I went to City College, one of my most beautiful experiences,
City
education.
College, where, Maulana? See, everybody don't know your history.
Los Angeles City College.
Okay.
I bet that was the best city college in the world. I'm sure people in New York think there's this too. But
Yeah.
it was just such an array for me, right? And so that was very active. I was in the civil rights movement. I was in the peace movement. I was in the anti-capitalist movement, right? I was the first black student body vice president and the first black student body president. And I guess how I won the
Now, what
presidency.
years we talking about?
61 and 2. I
61 and
think
2. Okay.
61 and 2. And I won the presidency by appealing to and working with. I'd already had good relationship with them because I always identify with third world people, and I organized them, and I had a landslide because no one ever thought of organizing them. They were like foreigners in a foreign country, but I saw them as potential allies.
And by them, you mean Chinese?
What'd you say?
You mean Chinese? Asian people?
No. It was all kinds, all the 4 groups, right? It was
Okay.
Latinos, Latinos, Asians, continental Africans who were foreign students, right?
Okay. Okay.
And there wasn't many Native Americans, maybe 1 or 2, but mainly those other 3 groups. And so I saw that in my consciousness as a way to relate, and so I related to them. I also at City College, and that was my first encounter with Marxism. And we had a small group that was headed by a brother named Levi Kingston. And Levi Kingston, he didn't have an ideology except he wanted to relate. And so he pulled us all together. And we used to talk about all the European philosophers. Now, this is where I make my change, right? This is what he would call my encounter. So
now you can't laugh at my brother now.
But I'm already in blackness already. Wherever I go, I'm in blackness because I got a black school and a black beginning and a black family and a black neighborhood I come from. And I'm thinking,
you're in black culture.
So I come into contact with Marxism, fellow students of various kinds, of Stalinists, Leninists, Trotskyites. The Trotskyites were most active for some reason. They were more active. They produced more literature.
Yeah.
So we used to get in a lot of conversations with them about the betrayal of the revolution, Stalin's betrayal of the revolution,
Okay.
maybe Stalin even killing Lenin. But we read these books, and one of the most important ones that we talked about, because we wanted to be organized, what is to be done, and how do you reorganize a society,
That's
right?
right. That's
We did
right.
a Vanguard Party, Mass Democratic Party. How do you protect the gains that you made? It's a lot of conversation. So I'm
That's right.
coming in this not, like naked and in need, but fully clothed in my own culture. And the question I'm asking now is, with Garvey, where's the black man, king and king?
Okay.
Where's the army, his navy,
Yeah.
his men
Okay.
and women of big affairs? I couldn't find them. So I said we're supposed to, and Garvey said, I said, we're going to help make them. So I felt a kind of thinking back to my mother and father and thinking about the need to do something for black people. It wasn't enough for me to read white literature. So also, I
Mhm.
didn't tell you about this, but when I was in York, I was so needy of getting beyond the white image, the white framework, which became an imprisonment, a conceptual imprisonment, that I began to read Asian literature because I didn't know there was an African
Mhm.
literature, right? It's only
Okay.
when I finally get to City College and also in deep structure,
So what you reading?
UCLA,
Confucianism?
UCLA.
Confucianist texts? Are you
Pardon me?
reading Confucianist texts? Buddhist texts? What
Oh,
are
yes,
you
I'm
reading in
reading
terms of
that. Yeah.
Asian literature?
Confucianism, Taoism,
Okay. Okay.
Buddhism, Hinduism, right? I'm reading those basic texts. And I'm finding some common ground in this whole communitarian idea, which I'm gonna go back in a minute. And then I was impressed by the rise of the nation of Islam, right? And I know people
Mhm.
like to savage the messenger Muhammad, but I'm telling you, they were the first to problematize Christianity, right? Both
Mhm.
Muhammad and Malcolm. By problematization, I don't mean like Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, who actually raised the question, but he did it internal to
Right.
the
Right.
faith. They stood outside of it and questioned its utility in what? The liberation struggle. That was
Mhm.
something. And they had the capacity to do that. And they taught us a new blackness. Now, the two things that other people, and this is in my book on Malcolm, that Malcolm and the messenger taught was they both sacralized and demonized blackness. That's a whole
Yeah.
different kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
That
We
became,
get to that later, but yeah.
that
Yeah.
became a mode of resistance. But you asked me how I formed my
Yeah.
consciousness,
No,
right?
I am. I am. But
Okay,
I'm
and
just
then
trying to get you not to go too
the
deep in
the
that one.
next factor is the rise of the third world nations, the
Mm.
continental
Mm.
Africans, the
Bang
Latinos,
down.
Asians. But me,
Bang down.
I don't know
Bang
what.
down
Oh,
conference.
Van Dunk, certainly that. And by now, Malcolm's talking about that. Malcolm
Yeah.
puts that as a model we ought to follow, that those people came together on the common ground of oppression and resistance. It was
Mhm.
two. People
Mhm.
usually think of oppression, and sometimes Malcolm stressed that, but it's both oppression and resistance. Oppression and resistance. And that's what
Absolutely.
Kawaida
Absolutely.
always said. Never talk about oppression without resistance. Otherwise, well, let me. Then, of course, there was the whole question of developing my own philosophy, right? And so we wanted to raise consciousness. I then began to belong to and work with then our own vanguard. We called it the Vanguard of Seven, right? This is what we had
Mm.
on City College, right? So when those books talk to you about, somebody else helped me find us and all that. Oh, it was a group of people with us, but I called them to my house and I gave them the philosophy, Kawaida and then Guzo Saba. There's no record of any other philosophy competing with that in my organization. No records of their founding in my, but
Okay.
people can get
You
away with
got to
anything.
give us some dates because I want my audience to be able to follow your development. So you're
Yeah,
developing the
but this
theory of
is this is
Kawaida, and this is early 60s.
no 63, 64. I'm beginning to develop my philosophy while I'm at part of it at City College, but the real structure of it becomes at UCLA. And then
Okay.
after I leave UCLA, I
And you're a
really turn
philosophy
to it
student,
because
right?
I got time. Pardon me?
You're a philosophy student.
My philosophy, what about it?
You're a philosophy student
Yes,
at
yes, yes.
UCLA.
So yes, at City College, I took a lot of philosophy class, and I was into it. And like I told you, I read Asian philosophy, which they for a long time didn't credit as philosophy, but I read it, and I read the Europeans and some of the people that people liked. Because they were like rebelling and criticizing Christianity, were like Nietzsche, God is
Mhm.
dead, the whole kind of conversation. Bertrand Russell that criticized Christianity. So there's a lot of critiques of Christianity. There's a lot of critiques against war. Eric Fromm in the Sane Society. This is an insane society. So a lot of that kind of conversation from those I read, but I didn't stop reading my own literature. And one of the most important literatures at that time was Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, right? But we went back to the old days like New World of Coming by Roy Otley, right? You
Okay.
know, Simple Speaks His Mind with Langston
Mm.
Hughes. A
Oh, yeah.
whole different
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
literature,
That's my
reading
guy.
not just the people that did deep philosophical like Alain Locke, reading him, but also the New Dick, but reading especially Du Bois that preceded and made possible. We didn't. I'm ashamed to say this, but it's real. We didn't read Mary McLeod Bethune then, right? We read mainly
Mm.
male authors. That's what we did. So later, when we got over this thing,
Yeah.
then guess what? The sexism, the patriarchy, then we read all of it, and it's so rich. Okay, so I want to just stop there. Let me just say this: when we talk about blackness, it's coming into consciousness, right? That's
Right.
the defining feature of blackness. Three things: color, culture, and consciousness. And consciousness is active self knowledge about our own people, their identity as Africans, and as a people in oppression and resistance. This
Okay.
active self knowledge.
I've
That's
always appreciated that color, culture, consciousness, but I know that by color, you don't simply mean skin color, you mean ancestry, you mean lineage
yeah. And
of
that's what I
African
was
descent.
telling.
And so
I was
I want you to stress that because we're going to have some people who are going to reduce it to
That's
skin.
right. Yeah, and some
So
of it was malicious. They knew
don't
what
let
we were
that dumb
talking.
shit
We,
go.
and if you look even in this, even in the quotable, we make a distinct that color is genotype and phenotype, and so it can't even be just phenotype because there's some dark white people, right? Right. And so,
And some
but
really
the
like
key,
black people.
what you said,
I
and
said
some
there's some
light black people.
really like
Very
black
light
people.
black. And some black people got yellow hair and never saw white people, right?
That's
The
right.
Australians, a lot of them are born with yellow hair
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
grow out of it, but so
Oh,
that's
the
not even an
Khoi, they
issue.
got blue eyes.
Right, that's
Yeah,
right. Some
yeah.
of them. And so here's what I was saying: that what we meant by culture is views and values and practices that come from that culture. And I got a larger definition of it later, but I don't want to preempt what you might ask me later. I'm just telling you this was it: color, culture, and consciousness, a value system by which we ground ourselves, orient ourselves, and direct our lives toward good and expansive ends. And then finally, consciousness. Everybody talk about raising consciousness, but consciousness for what? Well, that's where the Vanguard Party comes in, to cultivate in the people their capacity not only to satisfy their material needs, but helping them to become self-conscious agents of their own life and liberation. So we had said in our doctrine and in our we got to first educate the people. So we started with just education. Then we had to mobilize, then organize, and then confront. We say education, mobilization, organization, and confrontation leads to transformation. You cannot skip one of those steps. You've got to do that. And a lot of times people don't want to do the education.
Yeah.
Building a party, building a revolutionary group requires education of people. Well, we
Mhm.
need to arm. I said, hey, you know what? As for arms, we got them. And if we didn't have them, we could find them on the bodies of the enemy and in their armories. What is important is that the people themselves decide the need for struggle, and they develop both the method and the means. That's our position. And I've written that and said that. You can find that in the article I wrote in the Free Press during the 60s.
But more importantly, Maulana, you live that. And see, that's why I keep saying I want the lived experience. So I'm gonna ask you this question, then we're gonna move on. But
Mm-hmm.
what impact did Watts 65 have on your developing political consciousness? Was it so how did Watts impact you? Because you're there in LA at that
Oh, yeah.
moment.
And we go out into it. We get out into it. And I build a lot of alliances. And some of the very brothers that were waging that war became part of my organization. Tommy Jacket, Halid Fu, Karki Hikima.
Now these are street organizations.
Yeah,
What the other folks call gangs.
yeah.
So
They,
us was built by bringing in the lumping
yeah,
and
that's what we said. You
re-socializing them.
can't be lumping though. See, that's the whole
No,
point.
you got to
Like,
change
you
them,
have to
but
lump
that
it.
was lumping when you got them.
Some of the people, but not these
Some of
people I'm talking about
okay.
now. But I'll
Okay.
get to that. But what was a defining feature for the whole movement itself? That for us marked the beginning of Black Power. Even before Kwame Ture shouted it, it was already a turn, right? That the civil rights movement had become historically exhausted, right? It had done what it did. And at the same time, what it did was for the first time in history, a bourgeoisie argued against its own community, which is a source of its wealth and strength. Said not only should they leave it, you should leave that. I mean, that was so strange, that right? So our organization was to argue for a Black power that had three basic characteristics: a collective struggle for self-determination, control of the space we occupy, right? And relationship to other African peoples, building that unity Malcolm talked about. Next, self-respect, rootedness in our own culture, where we authenticate ourselves, we legitimize ourselves. We don't ask for permission from Sweden or from the US government or something like that. And finally, self-defense. So Black power is a collective struggle of people to achieve three things: self-determination, self-respect, and self-defense. And that means to defend both armed or otherwise. That's what we are. That's what Malcolm's, and this is an important thing about Malcolm. Malcolm said this phrase, and a lot of times people misunderstood it, but I try to write it out in detail in my book on the liberation ethics of Malcolm. He said, freedom by any means necessary. Most people think, let's do anything for freedom. No, it's two aspects to it: a message to the oppressor and a message to us. The message to the oppressor is the one that Nelson Mandela gave the Boers when they told him, we'll let you out if you forswear violence. He'd say, what are you talking about? You're the one committing violence against me, right? All you do have to do is stop it. Nobody be doing violence, right? So Malcolm's position was to the white man or to the oppressor, stop your violence and you don't have to talk about it. Then freedom is achieved in another way. But the other thing is for us, the message to us. Are we willing to give the ultimate sacrifice to achieve our freedom, right? And when we talk about sacrifice, we mean give your heart and mind, give your time, give your effort, give your material resources, and finally, the wholeness of yourself. And that could be your life or your death, or both.
Mala, I want to revisit this because at some point I want to talk about critical incidents that, because you're engaged in actual struggle, you're in the community, so it's not just a matter of what you're reading that's transforming your consciousness, it's the actual work that you're engaged in. But I want to move on now. And what I want to move to is I want to deal with criticism.
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to address what I think are the two lingering allegations that have kind of circulated around you over the last 30, 40 years. One concerns the killing of Panther leaders John Huggins Jr. and Bunchy Carter at UCLA on January 17th, 1969. And in fact, someone just put that in the chat and said they heard it. And so clearly this is a young person. So I want you to respond to that allegation.
All right. Yeah, I signed you for that. And that's one of the things, though all those people that have written those books have not asked me about
No, okay, now okay, you say all those people have written those books.
the
What
so-called Black
specific
Power
people? What
historian.
specific people and what books? You got to give me some
See,
names.
I'm not going to do that because I don't want to
You
give
don't
them
me the
that.
book. Okay,
Oh,
okay.
All you have to do is look at those Black Power books and ask, do you see any quotes from me about my
Okay.
philosophy,
So you
about
mean
this,
the
about
books
that?
that come out of what's called the New Black Power Studies?
Yes, yes.
Neil Joseph, and there's a series of those. Okay.
Yeah. So first of all, let's be honest about what happened here. It wasn't a conspiracy. It wasn't over the Black Studies program leadership, right? All this is mythology, right? It was two groups vying for power, right? and the older students did this to me and all. No, we had equal amounts of students out there, right? That's why they struggled, right? And what we have here, Sundiata, is a shootout. And there were 13 shots fired. And that came out in the trial in the newspapers. Anybody want to see that, but they want to keep the myth. And notice how they don't usually, you're one of the few people that said John Huggins. Usually they just say Bunchy. But Bunchy is the one who drew first. And not just, I'm saying this, Geronimo Pratt, right?
Yeah, no, I've read Geronimo's, and because I've read Geronimo and how he frames it, that's one of the reasons I want you to speak to it, because Geronimo gives support to your interpretation as opposed to the one that immediately came out. So I want you to clarify.
So as Geronimo said,
did you give an order? Did you send?
I did not give an order. I'm not even in town. I don't even know what's going on, but we're building up to it. And I wrote a book on it, right? But I'll get to that in a minute. I wrote a little pamphlet. I was trying to we used to work with the Panthers, right? And I want to talk about that just a little while, but not now. I want to just finish what you raised with me.
Yeah. Just when get to what happened.
Now he divided us, right? And so one of the things that happened is a shootout is that a brother from us and Elaine Brown were dealing. Mm-hmm. And they got to arguing about something, and she slapped the brother, and the brother slapped her back. She went and told Bunchy came, he pulled, as Geronimo said, they pulled first, they shot first, right?
Now, she was also she was involved with Bunchy as well, right?
I do believe from all reports, right? I mean,
I think that's what Geronimo says. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she was right from all we knew. And I'm not sure she wasn't also involved with John Huck. But anyhow, they came and because it wasn't just about her. Also, she provoked it, but we had this tension.
There was the animosity.
And I'll tell you what the tension was about in a minute. So they came and they shot first, but one brother, and I don't want to talk like this. This bothers me to talk like this, but one brother hit both of them, right? And then one of them got a shot off and shot our brother Watani. He's leaving. He's not even in it. He's not armed. He's not in it. Then I know the person who did it, and everybody else know the person, came in and picked up the guns from John and Bunchy and said they were unarmed. But the bullet in Watani proves that's not so. The bullets in the wall proves that's not so. And Geronimo's reaffirming it because Geronimo was a mentee of Bunchy, and he loved Bunchy. He said, I wouldn't say this if it weren't so, that the us brothers were actually defending themselves. And somebody needed to say that. People got to stop just being dishonest because it carries this on. This is the only character assassination, just like my political imprisonment. They just go on this for 50 years, right? So,
but I think you've clarified that.
Okay.
I think you've done a superb job of clarifying that.
There's something.
Go ahead.
If I can, Sundiata.
Go ahead.
So out of that, because you see, this came about as a result of the Panthers wanting to call themselves the only vanguard of the movement, and the white people, SDS, passing their Port Huron statement that they're the vanguard, not only of the white movement, but the black. Yeah, what are y'all talking about, white people? No. So they had brought the white people. We start arguing over that.
Maulana, I think you're correct.
I had to finish it. They were armed, and they were able to crush the conversation of all the other groups except us, right? They couldn't do that with us, right? And so that's what happened because so they began character assassination against us, saying I was an agent and all that. Geronimo told them that was a lie. That he knew how that started, right? The second thing is when you talk about working with the police, we used to work with them. Some of our sisters and brothers were in relationship with their members, right? They had
you said, wait a minute. So people don't misread this, Maulana. You started off saying when they said we work with the police. And then your next sentence was, we work with them. People gonna think that you mean you work with the police.
No, we work with
the Panthers.
Thanks for that clarification. Okay, there's no record anywhere. Right. In fact, the police, we're on this is what is important. We're on every list of radicals that the
What the
FBI
Panthers are on, yeah.
intelligence service produced that the Panthers is on.
Yeah.
And they followed us even up to 75. They got a report because, you know, our relationship with the Palestinians, with the Koreans, the Cubans, etc. We're violating some kind of law they have.
All right. I got to
It's
cut
in
you
my
off
book.
now on that point. I got to cut you off on that point. You've addressed it. Now the second.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm very clear you
but
have.
let me just say this, Dr. Brother. We had to go underground. Some of the people went in exile, you know, and then we were put in captivity on trumped up charges, which leads me to your next question, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right?
So you done anticipated my next question, and
Yeah.
it is that I put it, the most favorable argument is that you were afraid of a Panther hit, and that you were also afraid of the extent to which FBI and police forces had infiltrated us. And the argument goes that you became paranoid and that you were searching for the mole, for the snitches, and you began to have members tortured. And amongst the members that you tortured were a couple of women. Now, that allegation continues to circulate. How do you respond to that allegation?
The way I've always, I'm not guilty of the state's charges. I've always maintained my innocence. I'm a victim and a survivor of the COINTELPRO, right? And if you read the history of the trial, and Halisi, Imamu Halisi has an article on a black leader in captivity from the during the in the Black Scholar. You could read this, you know. And
you know I didn't read it.
Yeah.
So
when I
we
said
talk
that,
to
I'm
these
talking
other
to the
people.
audience. Yeah, I appreciate your knowing that.
Yeah.
And the charges made against me were first made against somebody else. But the woman that was finally given immunity had a case against her. And see, it's hard for me to say these things because first thing people, oh, you're blaming the victim. No, wait a minute. There's no victim here. And this person actually, people say it's two people, but actually, I was found guilty by the state of one person, and it was for false imprisonment and force. Uh, so the reality is that I'm sacrificed, and the history of this is that it's a rare brother and a sister in the early organization was not approached by the police to set me up.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to. This was in San Diego as well. We in our organization history, we have those people talking about that. And the charge again was assault with force and false imprisonment. And they had 4 years out of my life. And they told me, look, if you confess, you can get out early because it was an indeterminate sentence from 6 months to 10 years, right? That's California.
Repeat that.
It was 6 months to 12 years, right? 10 years, 6 months to 10 years.
Okay.
They said to me, they came to me several times, if you confess, right, and say you can get out earlier. I said, I'm not. You can keep me alone. The only reason I got out early, you know, and they did everything to me. I need to tell about my political imprisonment because people don't even know. I was in the hole, put in the hole for a whole year. I didn't have any light, sunlight, and all that. That was gone. I had a hole in the floor for a toilet, right? A dirty, filthy piece of cloth for a mattress. And then they drugged me and then assaulted me, beat, you know, battered me in there. And I suffered a lot. Then I developed something in there. And they kept saying that it's just in my mind. My house, Chimoyo, brought a doctor in and saved my life. You should see me. I look like Gandhi, right? I'm in there just on the cusp of dying. And they wouldn't let me read material, right? My house wrote me, when I say my house, that's Chimoyo, my wife, my companion in all things good, beautiful, and sacred. Those of you who know me know her. But anyhow, she used to have to type up my books and articles in her love letters, starting out with love and writing about 3 or 4 pages because you wrote long letters, and then she would put the rest of an article I would need or a chapter from a book or something like that. So it was not easy for me to be off in there, but I did work. And one of the things I did was to help form a study group. And most of it was on Black Marxism, right? And some good thinking.
When you say Black Marxism, are you saying that you mean Cedric Robinson's book, Black Marxism?
Oh,
You
no,
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 no, you
no.
get out before that. You mean Black people who were
Yeah,
Marxists?
yeah.
Are we talking CLR? Who else we talking? Du Bois, Claudia Jones? What you talking?
No. I'm talking about the prisoners themselves. You know, the prisoners themselves.
Yeah, I know, but you said
Well, people
Black
used to bring,
Marxism.
yeah, they used to bring Marxist books in, especially the Trotskyites, but also the Leninists used to bring books in. And I don't name the brother's name, but we used to talk and argue about this over race and class and the function of both. So it was a good thing. I was also in the Humanist Club, you know. Also got A in a Hebrew class I took. You know, it was a lot of things. I mean, I did a lot to stay active, and I refused to go work in the factory. They put me finally in the library, but I refused to go. I'm not going to work in the factory, and the people they put me like that. So I'd rather stay in myself. I've gotten used to being by myself anyhow in the hole that long, right? So it didn't matter to me. Plus, when I was with my mother and father, and we go visit people, I just sit quietly anyhow for hours. They would go over, visit, but I would listen to them and learn from them. But so I was ready. I was already disciplined. And I told Tim Oyo, she should be ready for me to be at least absent 5 years, if not killed. And that's how we came together, my house, when we talked about it. So this was not an easy thing for me. Now, let me just end with this, saying this. Again, I'm not guilty. I've always maintained my innocence. Everything you wrote and saw, I've said that. I told the board that. I refused to confess wrongly against myself to get out early. And I always give Merv Donnelly an intervention for saying, y'all are persecuting this person. He's been in. That's when he became lieutenant governor. He was able to act. And that's how I got out. Otherwise, I might have been the whole 10 years, right? Now, this last point I want to make, and I'm not excusing, people can believe what they want to, but I asked you this. The state has charged me guilty. The state hacked 4 years out of my life. What do people want after this? What do they want? And these are hypocritical Christians who said, you know, they always got a prison project. They want the prisoner to come out and they're going to forgive the prison. They talking to the white man. They ain't giving the prisoner, but they love to hate me for something. And I don't think it's just them. I always look for the Aryan hand in this. And they're doing the work of the COINTELPRO. It's continuing. It's continuing because it's dividing the movement. Imagine Sundiata. What would happen if us and the Panther kept working together? We used to work together before Everett Cleaver came out of captivity. Then he broke us up. That's in February 1968. And I tell you how it happened. We were holding the largest Free Huey rally. This is our organization, us, which is the major leadership in the Black Congress. We're holding the largest Free Huey rally and raising money.
Is this L.A.
February 1968.
Okay, this is the one that Stokely, H. Rap, and James Foreman speak at?
All of them. Race Tiarina, right? Race Tiarina is there.
Yeah.
We got a big thing there, right? And then they never gave us credit for it. But what happened is that people need to know this. This is what Elder Cleaver, he's used to, you know, coming speaking and talking to the white girls while the white girls dress out and all that. So he said, you know, we got to get the pigs in the rally. We got to get it out. It's a dishonor to. I said, sit down, Elder. You know, you're not. You know, I was hard line then. You know, I talk frank. I talk like a general. I talk. You know, I'm into revolutionary mind. So I said, man, you need to sit down because what you're doing is not real. And that's I was going to criticize y'all anyhow, because that's one of the arguments we had with the Panther, taking Custer stands and not doing guerrilla warfare. You can never fight a stationary war with superior forces. You got to do what Sun Tzu said and Malcolm and Mao repeated. Make a noise in the east and strike in the west. When the enemy advances, you retreat. When he retreats, you advance, right? It's all there. People, that's why we said the red book is better read, right? So I told him the red book is better read, man. And those people that you're talking about, they're security guards. By the way, later on, we helped build the first security guard union right here in LA. And I got an award from the SEIU for doing working with them. So anyhow.
Okay, so this is good. Let me slow your roll. Because what you've done is you've put yourself, you've put us and its history beyond simply what people have called cultural nationalism.
Yeah.
And you've put yourself engaged in organizing workers' union. You put yourself involved in organizing around prisoner issues. And
Mm-hmm.
so all of that is good because it helps give a depth
Mm-hmm.
to the history
Mm-hmm.
of us. But I want to move on because I'm trying to get somewhere, right?
Uh-huh.
And so now I need you to. You've talked a bit about Kawaida theory, but I
Mm-hmm.
actually want to back you up on Malcolm,
Mm-hmm.
right? You actually knew Malcolm and
Mm-hmm.
had a relationship
Yes.
with Malcolm. And so what I want you to talk about is the nature of that relationship. And then I want you to talk about to what extent does Malcolm influence you in the construction of Kawaida theory? And, and what are things from Malcolm that you don't bring into Kawaida?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, I met Malcolm. Appreciate what you've asked, Sundiata, if I'm saying correct. I met Malcolm uh, first at UCLA. Even though a friend of mine said we met him
You got to
at
give me years, Ma. A lot of people got to have
so
years.
63.
63.
We
Okay.
invited him to UCLA. We invited him to UCLA. And we came up to talk. And he told me, why don't you come to the mosque? I'm lecturing at the mosque. So I went to the mosque. And he said, after I met, he said,
This
because
is
he was
after
trying to
Stokes was
recruit me.
killed, right? This is
What'd you
after the
say?
murder. This is after the murder of Stokes and the beating of the 7 Muslims in 62 in LA.
Yes. And so, but no, it has to be before. I see she's right now. So it has to be 62. I'm sorry.
Okay.
62. Because the reality is that he asked me to MC one of the programs to gain community support at a church that's no longer existing there called the Garden of Prayer. And I hope somebody is able to get that because there's a lot of good pictures out of that. And also it represents a history that's hidden, right? But anyhow, let me tell you about so once we left UCLA, went to the mosque, then we left the mosque, and he asked me to come to the Muslim restaurant, which was on Main, 51st, I think, in Maine. And we stayed there until the buses stopped running regularly. And we talked about Islam and what it meant. And I told him, I'm not into that. I gave up religion, the Christians and the Jewish faith. I'm not into that, Judeo-Christianity and the Abrahamic tradition. So we talked a long time about that. But I was never so impressed with the acuity of his mind, the incisiveness of his analysis. He was just brilliant, and I just liked him. And I said, I said, I got to go now because, it's getting late night. He said, well, you got to ride home. I said, no. He said, I'll drive you. He drove me by himself to the house and we kept in touch. And I wrote him. And I was glad to see when I was doing research for my book, he had kept a letter that I'd written him. It's a little short letter that I reminded him. He asked me to send a column I was writing. I used to write a column for the Herald Dispatch, which was a black paper.
Right.
In
LA.
supported the Muslim in LA.
Yeah.
Right. So that was it. But I met with him every time he came that I could until finally, of course, the split in the nation. That was a bad day for me. Ooh, I can't tell you how depressing that was. Because Malcolm had given his life to it, right? And I just saw this as something. I didn't know about the COINTELPRO, but I always thought that the enemy will always try to divide, right? That's one of the fundamental forces, divide the forces of the people and weaken them and make them attack themselves, right? And so it was just a tragic thing. And then I didn't see him much after that because he had to come in. But I knew when he came in, he had to come in and he come in. He was talking to the secretaries, etc., doing some other things. They were trying to kill him. So I never got to talk to him after that. And then when I heard that he was martyred and assassinated in February of 65, that was another tragic day for me. But I met his widow, Dr. Betty Shabazz, and I continued through her because 1 year after his martyrdom and his sacrifice, we invited her, and it was the first time. Usually people talk about her going to Oakland with you and them, right? But
Mhm.
we invited her first, right? And she came. Everybody was afraid of the nation. They didn't know what the nation would do. They didn't know what the white people, or I should say the FBI and the law enforcement would do. And so we invited her. You know, she was glad to come. She told us this is the first time that she had come out. That's the year also they were going to put me in captivity for what they call disrupting the school system, because our organization called for recognition of Malcolm's birthday and sacrifice day as a national religious holiday. It's religious to us. He's a saint to us. So they say I was disrupting, but that fell through because I was arguing for religious. So if you don't do it for the Jewish and Christian holidays, how you do it for us and our black holidays? But we have some good tapes on that. People need to know that when we finally make a real serious film on us, you'll see all the things we did, working with the unions, working with political people, building institutions, building low-cost housing like the Ujima Village, helping to build health centers like Kedron Community Health Center, the Watts Health Center, sitting on the planning board for all of these things, building the Brotherhood Crusade, and building that Black United Front, the Black Congress that we spread all over the country.
Okay, now Maulana, I want to make a shift, and I want to shift it to Black studies.
To Black what?
Black studies.
Yes, please.
Black Africana studies, right?
Yes.
So now you've been a member of NCBS, the National Council for Black Studies Executive Council, for more than 2 decades, right?
Yeah.
Because
Long time.
you and I shared a decade.
That's right. It was good. Good working with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how would you characterize the current state of the transdiscipline of Black Africana studies? What are the fault lines, and what's the trajectory? Right?
We are, as our people are, and we have to see that, a group in oppression and resistance. And we've got to deal with that. And in order to deal with it rightfully, one of the first things we have to do, and you've said this, and I've quoted you in the article I wrote on the 40th anniversary of NCBS, we've got to reaffirm our original activist mission. If we lose that, we don't have Black studies. We got something, I don't even know what it is. It's not real, right? So that's the first thing to do. The next thing we've got to do is develop what I call conceptual generation. We got to generate concept that help the masses of people to understand themselves, to assert themselves in dignity affirming, life enhancing, and world preserving way, dealing with the critical issues that face us as a people, as a society, and as a world. Black studies is supposed to do that. That's what Dr. Nathan Hare meant when he said we've got to take the campus to the community and bring the community to the campus in mutually beneficial way. That's what we've got to do. We've also got to get involved in policy development and policy critiques, right? We've got to make a public initiative. We've got to join the organizations that are fighting on the ground, right? Fighting on every level, because I believe what Haji Malcolm, Nana is, of course, honorific. Nana Haji and Haji's are honorific. Those who made the Hajj. So Haji Malcolm said, wherever Black people are, there's a battleground. That whether we're in the north or the south, the east or the west, you and I are in a country that is a battleground for all of us. And we in Kawaida say, everywhere a battle line, every day a call to struggle. And I think Black studies has to have that struggle mentality. If they lose that, they just another discipline on campus.
Okay, well, we lost it. So let's cut the BS. We lost it. So the rest of the question, no, it ain't every. Look, oh. You don't need to lose 100%. The activists
We've
don't
lost
control.
some of it. You know, I have to see
the activists. We lost the majority of the activists. Don't control the majority of Black studies programs. So the question, the question really was this, Maulana. The political thrust of the question was, how do we get it back?
Well, we have to realize.
How do we rebuild?
We got to realize
it as a activist problem-solving discipline.
Yeah. One of the most important things I said earlier, maybe I list all of them at once because I won't have time. The first thing we need to do is develop a serious literature in Black studies that deals with the issue that you're talking about. We have to create a serious community, rebuild a community of activist scholars that regularly meet with each other. Third, we got to deal with the identity issues that have come up, right? So, but people got all the different kind of identities except Black. And I told them, look, Black is my primary identity, right? And I say this to my LGBT brothers and sisters. Look, you can be any of that with any other people. You can only be Black with us, right? And what people are signaling you out for.
No, what does that mean?
What does that mean? That means that this is our ultimate reality, being Black in America, and Black as a lived experience, and Black as a basis for both oppression and resistance, and Black as a culture reality. We're always talking about the white man appropriating our culture. Well, if we're not Black, what is the culture? Right? We always say, oh, they're shooting us down in the street. Well, if we're not Black, we don't have no argument.
Okay, so here's what I think I hear you saying.
Yeah.
That whatever identifications people have,
other
it is
Black.
Yeah, what other identifications
Black,
people
we
have?
don't even have a conversation.
Black,
I told a brother and sister, I don't have no conversation with you if you're not Black.
Okay,
that belongs to somebody else.
It is the blackness that is fundamental, that is common. You said that it is the blackness that constitutes the glue.
Common ground. That's the common ground of Black studies. We're talking about Black people. And if you're going to argue Black people don't exist, or they got so many identities you can't do nothing with it.
But all Black people can come in. I want to get that clear. And I don't want people to misunderstand what you're saying. The basis of unity is Blackness, and therefore everybody that is Black can come in however they are.
That's the beauty of it.
Okay.
Here's my fundamental position. I teach this every day in my multicultural classes, right? Each people and culture is a unique and equally valid and valuable way of being human in the world. These are just different expressions of being human. But this Blackness, that is our core. And I'm arguing what's happening here is that some groups in the Black community are being erased so other groups can come forward. You don't have to erase me to come present. Be present so that we show the multiplicity and richness of what it means to be Black.
Now I want to push you on a
push
point.
Me.
Here. Okay, and here's my fundamental position. I believe that Blackness is fundamentally, right, we're talking about the modal experience. That by that I mean the most frequently experienced experience of Black folk is as a working class.
Yeah. Well, you added that in.
No, I didn't add that in.
As a people. See,
as a people, the majority of us have been workers. The enslaved, 89% to 92% of all of the African people in what became the United States were enslaved.
Okay.
That's a working position. After slavery, the overwhelming majority of us are tied to those plantations as peons. That's a working class position. When we move into the cities, south and north, right, it is as a proletariat, a wage labor force. We are still, if you run the data correctly, only about 8 to 10% of Black people are really in the middle class and above. So to be Black in this society is to be an exploited worker or part of the reserve army. So that I see that as being folded in. No, that's the overwhelming majority way of being Black, Maulana. And that's the point I'm trying to make.
I don't have any problem with that.
Okay, good. That's what I want to hear.
You told me not to exclude anybody.
I ain't excluding nobody. They ain't excluded.
Well, you said first of all, you were going to equate working class with Black, and I was saying you can't do that.
What I'm saying, no.
And what you said overwhelming, I don't have any problem with that.
I'm saying it's overwhelming. And so that the thrust of African American culture comes from the working class.
Right. You know, one thing we didn't get a chance, and I won't talk long on it, but I need to say it. The awesome legacy that Malcolm left us as an organization. First, Blackness as beautiful and sacred, right? Second, the logic of liberation. He said the logic of the oppressed can't be the logic of the oppressor if they seek liberation.
That's right.
And I said, if we need a new logic of liberation, we need a new language. And that's what I put a lot of
Read in
emphasis
your
on
theory.
defining reality, because
Right.
definitions are not just descriptions of reality. They become forms of reality when people embrace them, use them to guard their life. Cultural revolution. Malcolm taught us that we need a cultural revolution. We need to recap.
Elaborate that, because see, that's one of the things that you've been criticized for,
Mhm.
is that your notion of cultural revolution. So what I
Yeah.
want you to do for us is we're going to go back to nationalism,
Yeah.
because
This. I'm
you're
going to
seen
talk
as a
about
cultural
culture.
nationalist, but
We can't have a cultural
I want to
revolution
frame the
without a
question
culture.
for you. I want you to just go off. I
All right.
want to frame the question. So what I want you to talk about is, I need you to distinguish your notion of cultural revolution from Harold Cruz.
Yeah.
Right? And I
Yeah.
need you to talk about how your concept is, how do you distinguish the
My
actual
nationalism from
concept
other people's
of your
nationalism.
cultural nationalism that is different than the parody
Yeah,
that
but
we get?
so appreciation what you asked, if I understand correctly. Let me start with the fact of Keita, which is a cultural nationalist philosophy. I define it as an ongoing synthesis of the best of African thought and practice in constant exchange with the world. And what it takes as its fundamental point of departure is culture nationalist propositions. There are three fundamental ones that define. First, that the defining feature of any people or nation is its culture. Second, that for a people to be itself and free itself, it must be self conscious, self determining, and rooted in its own culture. And third, the quality of life of a people and the success of its political revolution depends upon it waging cultural revolution within and political revolution without, resulting in a radical transformation of three things: self, society, and the world.
Okay,
So the
now,
success of
whoa,
I
whoa,
said the
whoa.
stuff of his political resolution, but the
I
success
know,
of
but
his
I got you to do something first. I got
liberation.
you to do this first. See, how do you understand culture? Some people think culture is the arts. If I'm talking to a damn biologist,
So,
they think it's a
so here's
petri
what
dish.
here's what I
So
said
how
to
do
you.
you define culture here?
Culture is the totality of thought and practice by which a people creates itself, celebrates,
Yeah.
sustains, and develops itself, and introduces itself to history and humanity. And that occurs on at least 7 levels. Number one, there's a history to it. Second, a religion or spirituality and ethics, a social organization, economic organization, political organization, creative production, which is your art, your music, your literature, right? Dance, etc. And finally, the collective psychology you achieve as a result of practice in the other 6 areas. So we're talking about
We're talking about the
totality of people
totality.
thought and
So it was
practice.
never a narrow notion, is what
No,
you're saying.
this is
Okay.
the enemy want to do that. Look in the quotable. They always like to do the quotable and they'll take out the patriarchal conversation. But they don't get to the point where I say culture is the basis of recovery and revolution. The basis of recovery and revolution. The recovery of our sense of ourselves. Because the European worked, as Malcolm said, Haji Malcolm said, so hard to deculturalize us, to dehumanize us, problematizing us, he said, from the top of our head to the soles of our feet.
So
And
would you say that your understanding of culture and cultural revolution is close to that of Cabral?
it certainly is. And that is, right? Breaking the monopoly that the oppressor has on so many of our minds, right? Because we argue that until we win the cultural revolution, until we win this culture struggle, liberation is not only impossible, it's unthinkable. You can't conceive it. If you imagine you're already free, how do you struggle for freedom or liberation? And cultural revolution requires building institutions, as we have done. We've built institutions in this country and we've built them on an international level. We have to build institutions that outlast the issues that we're facing now. There's some enduring issues, but there's some immediate issues, and people get caught up in episodic engagement, black power, and all. Then they're gone. Where are they now? Where are those groups that talk so bad and so black? Where are they now? They've moved on like they do with funerals. I don't move on. I move forward, and I move with my history. This is our duty, we always say, to know our past and honor it, to engage our present and improve it, and to imagine a whole new future and to forge it in the most ethical, effective, and expansive ways.
Now, see, what I like here, I got a graduate seminar where we're looking at Black political thought. And I got 5 people. I
Mhm.
got we start with Ida B. Wells, because
Okay.
I think Ida B. Wells is one of the founders of Black Africana Studies. If
Okay.
you study Ida, right,
Mhm.
major activist scholar. Then we got Du Bois. Then I do Claudia Jones. Then I do Malcolm, and I did Malcolm today, and I'm going to come to a Malcolm quote. And for the next 3 weeks, I'll be doing Kwame Ture. Now, the way I do it is we read an
What's the last
autobiography.
person you said?
Kwame Ture.
Okay, good. Oh, I always
Yeah.
say Toure. I didn't hear what you
Yeah,
said when
yeah.
you said Toure.
Okay, now here's the deal. We do a
He's,
autobiography,
that's good you're doing him.
then we do a biography,
Mhm.
then we do a monograph or a collection of essays that they wrote. So we do at least 3 types of books
Mhm.
on the individual, so we get deep. Now,
Mhm.
so we're doing Malcolm today, and what we were doing was Malcolm the speeches. The Britman edited first collection of speeches, and then we were doing the Liar Reinvention, edited by Jared Ball, my colleague here on Black Power Media, and Stephen Burrows, right? Those brothers, in which I have a piece in, and so that's what the students were discussing. But we found a quote in the Malcolm X Speaks thing, where Malcolm is asked this question by this journalist, a white woman named Need, and she asked him, about what's his program, and Malcolm's response is that don't talk about program because programs and policies change. Well, talk about the objectives, and my objective is to free Black people by any means necessary. Da 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 da. And so then he moves, and she says, well, and Malcolm says that the first thing you got to do with a sleeping people is you got to wake them up. And so this journalist then says, I mean, by explaining how they're oppressed. And Malcolm says, no. He says, by teaching them their history, their culture, and teaching them to love themselves.
And the humanity.
And well, that's what he's saying in essence, right?
No, but he used the word humanity
Yeah,
to wake him up to the humanity.
Yeah,
Madeline
okay.
Nader.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that point,
Yes.
I think, is what you're getting at.
Mm-hmm.
Is that my point? That first we must understand who we are and what our contributions have been, and be immersed in our culture in order to arm us for the battle.
And who are we in history? Not who we are on our license plate or our student ID. Who are we in history and in culture? If I could just say, so we got from Malcolm, Cultural Revolution, Pan-Africanism, a nation within a nation. The battle line is everywhere. The right and responsibility of self-defense and resistance. Third world unity. I mean, that was a big thing with us. You know that.
Yeah.
And
internationalization of the struggle.
Yes. Okay, we call it world encompassing because world encompassing consciousness and practice. Okay, then a Black liberation theology. Malcolm helped us open the way to that. And if you notice, Dr. James Cone, the dean of Black liberation theology, uses the fundamental point of the position I take that Black is our ultimate reality, and that's how he does his theology from the beginning. The importance of a united front. We've built so many united fronts, and we'll continue to build those, right? I'm in one now, the Black community, clergy, and labor alliance, the major groups in the city here. The centrality of self-transformation. Wake up, clean up, and stand up. I like that. Now, I want to just take one moment to say, this is Fanon. Fanon says, the liberation struggle succeeds to the precise degree that each person takes it upon himself to free himself in the context of the overall liberation. Irreversibly decide to free himself in the context of the liberation struggle.
Okay, then, now I got to interject, Maulana, because I want to get to questions from the audience for the last 15 minutes or so. But I want to ask you this question. This is something I've asked you any number of times.
Yes.
Because you're very sensitive to the assaults on your career and on your person, right? And my argument to you has been write an autobiography or a memoir so that you can tell your side of the story. You can't expect anybody else to say it to you. And as I've said to you any number of times, you and I have much in common, but we also have much that we disagree on, right? But I have deep respect for you.
Yeah, and I have for you.
So when you're going to write your autobiography or your memoir so that you get your story out there and people can react to that?
I hope I start doing it maybe this summer. I want to finish Malcolm first, and then I'll turn to that. But you know, and I know, and other people raise the same question. I need to do it, but I need time. And I'm just overwhelmed at the university. I'm overwhelmed with my own organization. We're working in limitation because of the pandemic, but we're still doing our work, right? Nationally, doing our work as well as locally. And so it takes time. And I've written a couple of books in between my writing Malcolm. So I really need
Well, I'm gonna say to this that what I found, because I'm doing this course, and this is like the third or fourth time I've done it, that the autobiography and the memoir are excellent places to sum up one's praxis,
yes.
and don't, and so sometimes you think you got to keep doing day-to-day work,
Yeah.
but we may benefit more as a people, future generations, if we have your story, and then we
You're
can
right.
lay it down beside Yui's story, beside other stories. You
Angela,
understand? And then we can
Bobby,
begin to compare,
James
and
Baldwin.
we can flesh out the contradictions.
Yeah.
But if we don't have that, then what we're left with is the slings and arrows of those who may be reacting. Like, I
Yeah.
know people who think you're an agent. You were an agent,
Yeah.
and I know from looking at FBI documents that's absolutely insane.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now I want to go to the questions. If that's okay. But if you want to do one final statement, do it now while I'm looking through the questions.
Yeah, and I wanted to just say that you can get I did an oral history at UCLA. That's one I did. So I got an interview history. It's a long one too, and I explain a lot of my development in. But there's nothing, as you said, nothing like writing my own autobiography, and I'll do that. I'll do it. And thank you for always raising it. And the other one you had said about us, I wanted to say people want to say that somebody gave me that. What do we use us? Why do we start? It shows three things: the priority of the people, opposition and resistance to the oppressor, and a commitment to a communitarian way of living our lives, doing our work, and waging our struggle. So that's it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm scrolling through these comments, and this is going to be
James.
Okay. This is okay.
Take your time out.
I had to find this stuff.
Yeah. And I want to say while you're looking.
Okay, so
we
I found one. I found one from Big Till. Big Till says this. Dr. Karenga made an interesting point. How did he go from racial consciousness to national consciousness? Was that through some type of work in the community, in our academia, or organizing? And I think that it's in it's in the point, but can you sum it up real tight for people while I move on to the next question?
Yeah, bro. Well, I see race and nation as peoplehood. So I don't mean race the way the European does. For him, race is a socio-biological category used to assign human worth and social status using white people as a model. But when we say race, we talked about a lived experience, a ground for opposition, for affirmation and resistance, and also peoplehood. Peoplehood. That's what I talk about. Peoplehood.
Okay. Now here's a question from James Thompson. Excuse me. No, it's from Chimbuku Timbo. And their question is, what is us doing now?
Appreciate what you said, if I understand correctly. Us is constantly building a Black United Front. We always interested in that, and we do plans together. We've worked with unions and fighting to get Black people what is called a living wage and good jobs. We had, as I told you before, not too long ago, we helped build security officers union, which was 80% Black, and they had no benefits or anything. We worked in that. We continue to work with unions. There are union representatives on our group, the Black Community Clergy and Labor Alliance. We do international and national education. Every week, we do Black and World News Forum every Friday night at 6 o'clock, where we analyze the world news and local news from a Black perspective, or Afrocentric. Every Sunday, we have a soul session. We've had this is our 56th anniversary going on In September, we'll be 57 years old. 57. Can you imagine that? Many of our organizations, like they've gone, but we're here in what we call unbudging blackness, and we're rooted in our culture and the beauty of this ancient ongoing culture. And so another thing we do is we still help the poor and the vulnerable. We collect food and clothing for them, especially during the Kwanzaa season. We also have the Limbiko Tembo School of Afro-American Culture, where we teach young people views and values that ground them in the best of what it means to be African and human in the world. We have publishing operation. In fact, Timbugo Tembo is the publisher of Sankoi and Press, who actually publishes a lot of work, not just mine, but other Black people work, and creating a dialogue. See, one of the things we argue in us is that the most important thing we can do is to have a dialogue with our culture and extract from it best ideas and practices and use them to enrich and advance our lives and the interests of our people. We also have a yearly KIPAS, Kawita Institute of Pan-African Studies, where we get people from all over the country and sometimes from outside in the world, and where we teach Kawaida and how to do critical thinking, what we call in ancient Egyptian Jair. Jair means deep thinking, right? Creative thinking, ethical thinking, right? Not just intellectual, but also ethical and creative.
Okay. There's a kind of question here, and it's did you have a beef with Dr. John Henry Clark? That's a question.
No,
here.
that was sad. That was sad. I hate to even talk about that because everybody so admired Dr. Clark. And you can ask Dr. Asante about this and anybody else that witnessed it. He used to praise me. In fact, at Atlanta, Clark, he called me a young Black god with a brilliant mind, etc. But for some reason, he got resentful. I don't even know why. He and Dr. Ben, they just did. I dedicated the Husia.
Is this around the classic African Classical Civilization Society?
Yeah, but before that, me and Molefi went to FestPac. That is to say,
Which
the
year?
International Festival of Arts and Culture.
Which year?
In Dakar. 87.
Okay.
When did we go to? And we went to ASCAC 84. We took 800 people and 200 more people came. We were building that, and we had an argument in ASCAC about what should we do, take trip or create an intellectual community that could translate the text, as I had done, and use them as a ground for a philosophical option to deal with the critical issues facing us as a people. You can't keep saying you're African-centered, and you can't speak from a framework that represents the best of our thinking. And so that's what I did. So I introduced the concept of Mott as a fundamental way of defining and pursuing the understanding of ancient Egyptians' legacy to the world. And I've been into that. That's part of my thing. And I wrote my second dissertation, 800-page dissertation on Ma'at, the moral idea in ancient Egypt, a study in classical African ethic. And I also do work in Odo Ifa, which is Yoruba ethics, a tradition, and it's a world tradition.
Okay, now Maulana, if I had Greg Carr or some of the other folks in ASCAP, they would make an argument that's more critical of your role in ASCAP. But I don't want to get to that. I've got some questions here. So a brother keeps asking.
But wait a minute. You can't just drop that out there.
Well, I'll come back to it. I'll let you get a word on that before we end.
That's not real.
But I got a brother here who says,
we built it. If it don't be for us, we don't have no ASCAP. We called ASCAP to LA. We named it. I gave it the name ASCAP. We published its first literature, right?
Okay, Maulana, I got somebody that's asked me 3 times. I got somebody that's asked me 3 times, were you ever a member of CORE?
No, that's another thing. I don't know how people do that. Some people have me a member of the Panther Party. I'm not no member of the Panther Party. I'm a member of us.
So you're saying that in terms of outside of a united front, you've only been a member of us?
Yes, only member. I was also a member of the African American Association, headed by a European named Don Warren, but is now
you mean the European name?
Khalid Khalid Mansour. Khalid
Okay.
Mansour. He was head of that, and people put that down. That was essential. I skipped over there because you asked me to hurry up, but I wanted to just say that, and you had it, of course, in your conversation. But I want us to realize that was so essential to me. I mean, this was the first time I had met Africans who could speak different languages like myself. Could actually get involved in the literature, could read the original Fanon.
Let me tell you something about on this ASCAP, and I'll let you get the last word on that.
Yeah.
But the reason I won the NCBS presidency was because there was a group of folk in ASCAP who linked Malefi to you and felt that your role in ASCAP had been destructive, and they decided to swing their support to me in opposition to Malefi, who I was running against. So clearly there's something there that y'all need to work out. But I'll let you quickly speak your piece on ASCAP, and then I got some new questions before we close it out.
Sundiata, you're a good man, and I know you wouldn't do this. But when you drop that and you don't say what they say, then I can't really answer. See, that's just
okay. Here's what they said. I didn't want to get so damn negative, but okay. What they said is that basically you took the work. What's the brother out of Chicago?
Jake Carruthers.
Jake Carruthers. That you pirated Jake Carruthers' work. That's one of the criticisms that's been out there.
Okay, good. See, now we can answer that. You know, and I know nobody writes like me. You can tell the difference between my writing. Everybody else is right. That's the first thing. Second, no one has done, and not Jake or anybody else in the Black community has done the thorough work on that I did. Second, in terms of Jake, I found Jake and I asked Jake to come and help me to co-host it. And he says in the beginning of the book we published, Maulana did all of this. I didn't do this. And I thank him for putting my name on it. That's Jake's words.
Okay.
See,
but that's a clear answer. And I'm going to be honest with you, as a self-criticism, I should not have waited all these years to have that conversation with you. But here's how you end up as a member. Here's how you end up as a member of CORE. Your Wikipedia page, somebody puts you in there as a member of CORE.
All that is just FBI trash, right? Peeling on Scott's book. That is nothing but trash. We're going to go to my website. What is my website? MaulanaKarenga.org. Official website, Maulana.org. Go to mine. You can see my history. You can see my work. You can see my literature, etc. But I want to just say this about ASCAC. People hadn't called together ASCAC. Dr. Bennett said we need a Black Bible. I said we don't need a Black Bible. We need a Black sacred text. So I began to work on it. I thought I could do it in 20 years. It's taking me now 30. I'm going on 40, but I'm going to finish it. And it's called the Hosea. And people all over the world use it and refer to it. In fact, Geronimo Pratt told me that was one of the books he read that gave him the kind of grounding he needed to deal with it. So, hey, we're doing a lot of good work. And for people to resent me, just like those people you talked about, they also say I didn't create Kwanzaa, that my organization created Kwanzaa, or the ancestors created Kwanzaa, or somebody up in the Bay Area created. That's why do people
I got one last question.
I needed to say
there's a lot. I know that there's a lot there. But here's the last question. I know the answer, but I think you need to speak to this. People are asking, do you support ADOS? You know what ADOS position is on reparations?
Right. No. I don't. It's not good to attack organizations and all it is just what the question is. What is the position you want me to say? Do I agree with? Tell me the position, and you don't have to tell me the organization. Okay. I don't want to do that. What is the position? What is their position? Certainly, some of the ways
that the only people that should get reparations. That the only people that should get reparations are people who can trace their lineage to at least one person who was enslaved in the United States, and that reparations should go to no other Black folk who are currently inside the political boundaries of the United States.
So what we have to do, if we're going to really deal with this, is face the fact that all Africans have been injured and all Africans need reparations. That's an international Pan-African position. But then there's a national position, right? And in the national position, that we got to ask, what is the injury to be prepared? What is the injury to be repaired, right? Reparations means repairing a gross and grievous injury. There are three levels of injury here. First is the Holocaust of enslavement. Second is the savagery of segregation. And the third is ongoing systemic racism. And so those people who've had the Holocaust of enslavement right here in this country, this is a national consideration. Just like, for example, if they were giving out reparations in Rwanda, nobody would say Black people need should get some reparations.
Black folks in the United States.
Yeah, Black people in this country. Same with Jamaica and the CARICOM. When they put their thing out, they didn't have us in it, right? And I didn't feel like they left us out. They got a specific issue they have to deal with. And I see continental Africans and Caribbeans who came later as suffering from ongoing systemic racism, so they need repair, right?
Okay. So what you're basically saying is that it's a historical question, and if you came here in the 80s, you need repair from the 80s to now.
Yeah.
So it's not that we would exclude. Your argument is not to taking ADO's position, which is not nuanced and isn't based on history, right? Because if you came here as an African or a Caribbean immigrant, from the point that if you've been here a generation, you've experienced racial oppression in the United States.
Yes, and you need repair.
All right, good.
I'm not against people getting repaired. Could I just say that our organization has a position that these are the fundamental requirements for reparation. First, public discourse, so we can clear up these questions. That's right. Second, we need acknowledgement that is Holocaust, that the fundamental root evil and enduring evil is a Holocaust of enslavement plus segregation and ongoing systemic racism. Third, we need an apology, right, from the state that says this, and not apologize for trade, business gone bad with collateral damage, but for a morally monstrous act of genocide that is not only against the targeted people, but a crime against humanity. And then we need recognition. We need monuments and teaching this in the schools, K-12 in the university system, the horror and meaning of this, not only to us and to this country, but to the whole world. And then next we need compensation. That's where people jump first. You know? Some of it could be money, but also could be free education, health care, right? Housing. It could be our land return, but we have to have a communal dialogue about it. And then preventive measures. We've got to have preventive measures so this doesn't happen again. And that means linking this to the overall liberation struggle. Without this, it'll happen again. And that finally, the seventh thing we got to do is get into struggle. In the context of oppression, there's no reliable remedy except resistance, righteous and relentless resistance.
All right, Brother Maulana, I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight. I think it's been a spirited conversation.
I enjoyed it.
I always enjoy speaking with you, brother.
Same
and
here.
I'm going to remove myself, and we're going to go to
your audience
the roll credits. Thank you, brother.